Howdy folks, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you I have a Mighty game review. Going to be taking time and checking out Terminator Resistance Annihilation line. Now, I've already done a previous review of Annihilation line, as well as I've also done a video talking about the Infiltrator update DLC that they dropped for Terminator Resistance. I'll put links in the videos down below. So if you want to get a more informative opinion of how I feel about Terminator Resistance as a whole, not just the Annihilation line DLC, which is what I'm going to be focused on in this video, you can check those out. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to talk a bit about the Annihilation line DLC, and I'm going to discuss if it's actually worth it or not. Now, I picked it up for like $13.50. That was the introductory price. The regular price is $14.99. I'm going to be considering the regular price of the DLC based on my review, just because of, well, who knows when you're going to see this review. If you decide to buy it off of this review, you know, I want to let you know if I feel it's actually worth your 15 hard-earned dollars. But anyway, so this takes place roughly about the middle of the game, maybe a little bit later. It's kind of like a side part of the game. You don't have to play the main part of the game either to do this.
So what's he like?
But this is after the Hunter series of missions. Or I think it's actually called The Hunted. That's where you find out about the Infiltrator Terminator the Infiltrator Terminator trying to track you down and kill you, and you link up with the Resistance with the other civilians with you. Some of the other characters from the main game return. Now you're playing as Private Jacob Rivers, but then obviously Baron is there. You just saw footage of her, and Jennifer's there as well. You just saw footage of her too. That being said, I didn't see any of the other characters when I was kind of roaming around, so I didn't see any of the other characters from the core part of the game. So, but this is kind of an offshoot of the main part of the game. That is kind of one of those you can, the way it plays out, essentially you do so much of the main game and then it breaks off to Annihilation line DLC, and then it comes back into the main game, and then that's how you finish things off with the main game. Now, that being said, you don't have to play it that way. You can just go in and play Annihilation line. They just recommend that you play the game up until a certain point, more or less, so that way it's not giving away any spoilers, and so you have some kind of idea of what's actually going on and how to actually play the game. Because when it comes to tutorials and things like that, it does make little notations, but it doesn't really go through a full tutorial. You just kind of go with it, which in my opinion is absolutely perfectly fine. This is not meant to be played before the main part of the game. It's meant to be played about the middle-ish of the game, maybe about 2/3 of the way through the game. Can't quite recall. It's been a while since I've actually played through the main story of Terminator Resistance. Which, with that being said, in general terms, just a really quick snippet, I felt Terminator Resistance was really good. It definitely does not get enough recognition. It doesn't get the recognition that it really deserves as a very solid game that is very faithful to the source material of the Terminator universe, especially the first two movies, Terminator 1 and Terminator 2. And actually, there's a little bit of a snippet here I'm going to give in a bit about being faithful to Terminator, especially Terminator 1. Now, there was some problems here. Now, I don't know why this looks so bad in the recording. It's just really bad in the recording. But I did have some FPS issues about midway through the DLC, and they really didn't let up. Like, basically, normally I run the game at around 60 FPS, and I do have my Terminator Resistance capped at 60. And for some odd reason about the mid part of the game, the FPS would not get stable. It stayed around 40. And then towards like the last third of the Annihilation line DLC, it restabilized at being 60. So it was just like the mid portion, maybe a little bit deeper into the DLC, my FPS just would not become stable. And that was an issue I've noticed with Terminator Resistance in general, that there were certain areas of Terminator Resistance that was just really just bad for the FPS. I have no idea why. To me, it feels like it comes down to the game's optimization. But that, I'm not some kind of tech wizard here. I don't really know this stuff through and through of why it could be. I mean, it could have to do with graphic optimization. It could do with script loading. That's a particular problem actually with Arma 3. And here it seems to be a problem as well, where, just like the core game, there are certain areas of the game where, for some odd reason, your FPS will take a dive. That being said, in general terms, if you can run Terminator Resistance, you can run the DLC. The DLC doesn't do anything. Terminator Resistance already doesn't do. Now, some cool snippets I'd like to see in the T600. There's also the T650s, which was like the rubber-headed infiltrator versions. So basically, your stock ground trooper version is the T600, and they would be armed with miniguns, and then the T650 would be the infiltrator version, and they'd be all kind of beat to hell. Half their rubber skin was gone. Half all their clothing was pretty well torn apart. And they also carried miniguns as well, but it was definitely cool seeing the T600. And that being said, the T600s were actually kind of tough. Now, I did notice, and I don't know if this was just a me thing or if this is actually legit. It seems like the AI for the T600 is worse than it is for the T800's 800 series. And the more modernized T850 infiltrators. So it is kind of cool to see that, yeah, they're tough as all heck, and they're not affected by any of the regular weapons in the game. You have to use explosive and plasma against them. But it is kind of cool to see that maybe there is a little bit of a downgrade in the AI on these older Terminator models. Now, the other thing I want to give my hat to them is they actually recreated a scene from Terminator 1.
I think I found
the scene where Kyle Reese hotwires the car and has a flashback, and they show the part of him and one of his, I guess you could say, battle buddy, throwing canister bombs at a HK tank. They actually recreated that whole scene, even the chase with the HK aerial and the car. And it was really, really cool to see it. Now, look, folks, don't get me wrong. It doesn't look as good in Terminator Resistance as it did in the movie. It was an amazing scene in the movie. But it was definitely really cool to see. Really cool to see that hat tip off, to, hailing back to the original Terminator movie, the inspiration for that story. They even show how Kyle Reese got in possession of the photo of Sarah Connor. So I really just, it's just really cool how they were able to even further tie in Terminator Resistance to Terminator the movie, Terminator 2, etc.
I'm joining Kyle Reese.
And that being said, I think the story was rather good. I had a lot of fun with it. The characters were entertaining, were enjoyable to be around. You kind of got into their story of how they're just trying to deal with things, being soldiers during the war and the whole 9 yards, trying to save humans from the Terminators because, yeah, they find out that the Terminators are essentially farming humans for skin and blood, which is, another, tip of the hat off to the original canon material. But it's just really cool how all that goes, where, it's just how the characters unfold and everything else, and how the story plays out, and just all the different nods to the Terminator franchise. And that being said, folks, it's got a good, well-rounded story. It's actually got good, well-rounded gameplay. I did see people mentioning about, it just looks like it's going to be 3 or 4 hours of linear shooting. No, actually, it's not really that much linear shooting at all. Probably about the first, like, 10, 15 minutes is nothing but story and trying to fill you in on what's going on, with probably about 10, 15 minutes of actual linear shooting. And then it's a lot of sneaking around, with maybe pretty much like maybe like the last half hour of the game being high action linear shooting. I mean, there's not a ton of linear shooting here. It's more of the going around trying to be stealthy, because the Terminator, you're by yourself and the Terminators completely outclass you. And it just gives you more of that gameplay that was in Terminator Resistance. So, I mean, you know, that being said, it's about a 3-4 hour DLC. It's going to keep your hands busy for sure. It's a good way to spend a week, you know, a day off from work, play a little bit of Terminator Resistance, do Annihilation line, maybe do some more of the Infiltrator DLC, whatever. With that being said, I definitely like it. I think it's actually worth the $15. Spend the $15 and you know, expand the story of Terminator Resistance, which already had a solid story. And this DLC just rounds it out even further. Anyway, folks, that is my review of Terminator Resistance Annihilation Line DLC. Hopefully you all enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and have yourself a wonderful day.